Welcome back. I know it has been a while since you've seen this countdown, but it was extremely hard going forward, making these decisions. And I wanted to make sure that these picks were top choices. So I had to carefully pick the best of the best, not based off nostalgia, but how well it has aged today. And I feel that these picks going forward are some of the best that the animation studios has ever offered to the viewing audience. So let's not waste any more time and get back into the proceedings, shall we? So, my number 10 is My number 10 is a cartoon that is just timeless. It has a history in animation that shaped it. No matter when you are watching it, one thing is clear. It's just a flat out entertaining piece of animation. Of course, I speak of Alvin and the Chipmunks. So, what made this cartoon great in the first place? Well, let me say that there are many other cartoons animated better, but you would be hard pressed to find a cartoon, especially in the 80s, that didn't only nail the core aspect of what a cartoon was, but also managed to be well made. Because let's be frank, many cartoons of the 80s haven't aged particularly well. It's the nostalgia we have for them that keeps us remembering them. This is not the case with Alvin and the Chipmunks. It did something a lot of cartoons didn't do. It never preached any kind of morals or educated the audience. For instance, Alvin was a very mischievous kid who usually got him and his brothers in trouble because he always had some kind of scheme to get something, whether it was to get rich or add publicity for the band. Of course, with it failing miserably, of course, with it failing miserably, it always caught the ire of their adopted father slash manager, David Seville. You were always guaranteed to hear him yelling, Alvin.
Alvin!
But that's what made Alvin and the Chipmunks stand out so much. Alvin was just like a real kid. Simon and Theodore were as well. But Alvin was the star of the show for a reason. We saw ourselves in Alvin watching it. It was Alvin who was at the core of most of the episodes. Alvin and the Chipmunks was just a cartoon and never tried to be more than that. Well, except for the final season, which was mostly spoofs of famous films. Also, I loved the Chipettes, female counterparts of the Chipmunks themselves. It was a great dynamic that played out great in most episodes, especially when they were in them together. They have their own episodes as well in the series. Looking at it today, I am impressed by how well they were created. If they had their own series, I wouldn't have thought twice about it. The aspect of the series that I truly adore was the singing montages. You were guaranteed to hear a tune from the Chipmunks and the Chipettes, whether it was a song made for the series or a cover. The episodes mostly had a certain formula, but we didn't care as kids. But seeing the series as an adult, you can see why it worked. It boils down to the score itself. You see, cartoons around that time were usually scored heavily, especially syndicated cartoons. It either covered up for a weekly produced cartoon or added to the cartoon itself. Alvin and the Chipmunks sits in a place between them. Let's face it, Alvin and the Chipmunks wasn't known for its deep storytelling, but it was nuanced enough for it to be entertaining. And the score just heightened it. When you hear it, it just lulls you. That overscore was the key ingredient for making it memorable. When you hear it as an adult, it takes you back to a time when you were watching it as a kid. Not a lot of cartoons can do that, so that's always a good thing. And not all cartoons need to have intricate story-driven plot lines and deep characterization. It just needs to nail the core aspects of a cartoon really well. That's what Alvin and the Chipmunks did better than a lot of cartoons before and after. And by the way, if you were wondering, yes, I do love the reboot. Besides Janice Carmen creating it for a new generation, It's a reboot that never forgets to nail what made the original series so memorable. If I ever were to do a list of top 10 reboots, this would be on it easily. In all, Alvin and the Chipmunks stands out as one of the best cartoons that the networks has ever had, and Ruby Spears' finest work to date. With the upcoming, or depending on when you watch this on air, free animation channel MeTV Toons, hopefully this is on their network for this generation can see it. Because this is the only way anyone will ever see this series again. I wish they would release it in a DVD box set. Such a dropped ball. Gotta love Alvin and the Chipmunks. My number 9 will go down as a controversial pick, considering that there are many anime series of its kind that is highly regarded to this day. Series such as Batman Beyond, Superman the Animated Series, X-Men Evolution, X-Men 92, etc. Yes, number 9 is another comic book IP, and my second is based on a Marvel Comics property. Choosing a series was tough, but one stood out in ways the others couldn't. Okay, here is my number 9. Okay, put down the pitchforks and torches. Hear me out. All of the animated series that I mentioned could have easily gotten this spot, and I hold them in high regard as well. They deserve to be on anybody's top 10. The 90s, 2000s, and early 2010s housed many of these great offerings in spades. But the Avengers did something better. It gave you a near faithful representation of the characters and the lore itself. It's possibly the best adaptation that I've ever seen come out of Marvel. It depicted the team's core members such as the Hulk, Thor, Iron Man, Ant-Man, Wasp, and Captain America, and Black Panther in later episodes, in a way that felt like it came straight off the pages of the comic books. The way the characters talked was how I imagined they would sound like if these characters were real. That could be the strength of its voice cast, but it's also the attention to detail in the scripts. This extended to the villains as well, such as Kang the Conqueror. First of all, the character himself was mostly known to avid readers of the comics. Of course, he's known now due to his inclusion in Marvel Studios' Ant-Man Quantumania. But here, his dialogue and interpretation was very close to the comics. More spot on than the movie was. It was so close that it felt the writers were adapting the comics verbatim. The world around our heroes just feels alive as well. This is due to the animation team's effort put into the series. Even now, it's a beautiful cartoon to look at. You can tell it wasn't cheaply done. That's always a good thing. On top of that, it was also the way the stories were structured. It always felt like something was going on in the world they inhabited, despite us not seeing events happen. This is something the comics did very well, and it's done here almost to perfection. I loved how they dove deep into Marvel's history and lore. You see characters such as Beta Ray Bill, S.H.I.E.L.D., and the Skrulls. Name anybody in Marvel outside of X-Men, and you are bound to see them make a small cameo or in this series entirely. Mind you, this series came at a time when Marvel itself was starting to get white hot. This series helped to reintroduce the lore to newcomers, and to have it on air, it signified a shift in comic book adapted animated series. To this day, you would be hard-pressed to find a Marvel animated series today that matches the level of care and detail as Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes did. Let's be honest, Marvel animation hasn't been on a great run outside of X-Men 97. Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes showcases what's missing in most of anything Marvel Studios or Marvel Animation produces today. In all, Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes stands out as Marvel's best in animation to this day. Too bad that the series had gotten caught up in politics between Sony, Disney, and Marvel Comics and halted the series from getting a third season. This was due to Disney wanting to do their own Avengers animated series based off the MCU films. Just imagine where they could have taken the series, as it borrowed heavily from the comics. The Secret Wars is one story that comes to mind when I think of what this series could have been if it had stayed on air. Nevertheless, Avengers, Earth's Mightiest Heroes, will always be remembered as the last time Marvel Animation had achieved absolute greatness. A series that celebrated the vast history of Marvel Comics in a special way that most superhero cartoons rarely do. Hopefully, Marvel Animation can return to making series just as great as Avengers again. But judging from what I've seen from their recently released anime series, let's just say that won't be happening anytime soon. My number 8th pick is one that built an entire lineup on its back despite it not being the very first Disney animated series created for television. That being The Wuzzles, of course. It was still an animated series that was the most significant of them all and solidified Disney as a major force in television animation, especially when it came to the syndicated market. My number 8 is none other than DuckTales. There's a lot that can be said about this cartoon. For many, it represents a time when cartoons were fun and something you had to park yourself in front of a television to watch every afternoon. Something that is sorely missing in today's landscape due to streaming platforms dominating most people's viewing time. That instant viewing of content is the new norm today. But back in 1987 and prior, you had to invest to ensure you watched. This was an era that housed peak television. This simple act of watching TV at a certain time made it more special. It's something you felt that you had to do as a child. DuckTales is an anime series that perfectly encapsulates that. Just getting home from school to watch cartoons always felt rewarding because as kids, we always felt going to school was too long and we just wanted to get home quick so we can watch our cartoons. They were our solaces. That and playing Nintendo, of course. DuckTales was much more than just some mere cartoon. It made me look at them as adventures. This was way before that I knew of the Carl Barks comics that the series was adapted from. DuckTales just felt epic, as if I was watching something important every afternoon. This was due to the storytelling and the music. As I once said many times over, cartoons around this time were usually overscored. There were only 5 cartoons that I always felt used it to great effect. On that list, I considered DuckTales to be number 1. It was vital to the experience of watching it and was the blueprint for every Disney animated series after it. Another thing when it comes to the music was that awesome theme song. It was one of those theme songs that every time you heard it, it just brought joy to you every time you heard it. I dare anyone who grew up on cartoons back then to find someone who could not sing the song. To this day, I never skip that intro. You just have to sing along to it. It's just one of those theme songs. As for the storytelling, it had a certain nuance that lent itself to enjoy it constantly. I found myself watching this series 3 times over when it was on air. I loved how it usually focused on Scrooge McDuck and his nephews, Huey, Dewey, and Louie, just going on some type of adventure. Speaking of Scrooge, I have to say that he's one of the most fleshed out characters ever in any cartoon that I have ever seen over the years. In this series, there are several episodes where they delve into his past, which ultimately leads to him becoming the richest duck in the world. They go as far as introducing characters that were vital to his growth, such as Goldie. Scrooge was a character that personified the true nature of persistence, or as he would say, work smarter, not harder. Which, by the way, stuck with me as an adult. Just seeing this character who got to where he was in life and cherishing the very symbol of his success, being his lucky dime, left an impression on me that I've realized today as an adult. He was someone who had it all, but always wanted more. It wasn't just for the sake of getting richer, even though he did like being the richest, but instead it was just for the thrill of finding something that he didn't obtain yet in life. Seeing Scrooge do those things made you believe that you could attain what he had and one day swim in it. Even though in real life you could never swim through an entire vault of gold. But I'm not Scrooge McDuck, so what do I know? But one aspect that always made Scrooge stand out was that he wasn't exactly as his namesake implied. He also had a heart of gold at times. No pun intended. There were a few episodes where money wasn't his most important goal, and he valued his family around him instead. Speaking of family, the main reason that he developed that warmth was his nephews, along with Mrs. Beagley and her niece Webbigail, who were in his life. The nephews, Huey, Dewey, and Louie, what can I say? They were the heart of the series in my book. They were the ones who went on the adventures with Scrooge. Despite them having slightly different personalities, they always knew what was right in the end. This, in turn, rubbed off on Scrooge himself. In an era where cartoons tended to stray away from any kind of continuity, DuckTales always made some attempt to evolve the characters in small ways. There is something that I would like to address, though. This aspect is something that the remake lacks. I absolutely loathe the portrayal of the nephews in the remake. They are portrayed as borderline, moronic, immature teenage boys, while Webby is given the traits that they were known for. To take the essence away of those characters and dumb them down never sat well with me. Sure, Webby, who in the original was more of a tag-along on adventures, in the remake, as I did like her portrayal in it, but at the expense of the nephew's warm-heartedness and adventurous spirits. It's that aspect of the remake that will never sit well with me, no matter how many times I view it. I have a lot more to say about that series than what I just said here. I will review it one day, but at least you know how I stand on it, a little bit. As for the original series, its biggest strengths outside of the storytelling and music were its side characters and villains. You would be hard-pressed to find anyone who watched DuckTales who doesn't remember the likes of Magica the Spell, always trying to get Scrooge's lucky dime, the Beagle Boys always trying to steal Scrooge's money out of his money bin, and of course, Flint Hard Glomgold, who always tried to one-up Scrooge so he can be the #1 richest duck in the world. There are animated series to this day that don't have memorable villains and side characters such as these. Characters such as Doofus, the nephew's chubby friend from the Junior Wood Scouts, and sidekick to Launchpad, McQuack, who himself was a doozy, always crashing his plane and equally aloof. Then you had Gyro Gearloose, the crackpot inventor who made gadgets to help Scrooge, and my favorite supporting character of them all? No, I'm not talking about Bubba Duck. No, I speak of the awesome Fenton Crackshell, aka Gizmo Duck. Sure, Fenton wasn't the coolest, but Gizmo Duck? Who didn't like Gizmo Duck? In all, DuckTales was a cartoon that was at the pinnacle of our childhood in the late 80s, early 90s. An animated series that paved the way for an entire lineup that revitalized Disney in a huge way going forward. If you haven't seen it and just seen the remake instead, please give it a shot on Disney+. I highly recommend it. Sometimes I wish I could go back in time to my days as a kid, not knowing anything that I know now, so I can rewatch it for the very first time again, parked in front of a television as I did back then. But that's not an option now. At least I can still sing that awesome theme song. My number 7 is from a long-running franchise that has been an American staple for years. About as American as the NFL, the flag, baseball, and apple pie. An anime series that made me rethink what an anime series could and should be. My number 7 is none other than Star Wars: The Clone Wars. This franchise has endured the test of time, and rightfully so. It's earned its prestige. But I have to confess, I am not the biggest fan of Star Wars. I know, you are probably thinking, how dare you not be a huge fan of Star Wars? It's the greatest story ever told. Trust me, I've gotten spiel on why I should like it from many over the years. I understand the passion that many have for it. Star Wars is an IP that many hold dear to their hearts, and I can always respect anything that elicits passion from its fan base. I am also a fan of many IPs, so I know the sentiment, but Star Wars has never appealed to me like other IPs have. I believe this is due to 2 reasons why it never did. First being George Lucas's inability to write compelling dialogue, which lent to the actors delivering very stiff dialogue. Sure, the story itself is compelling, but watching the movies have always been a hard task on my part because of this. The second reason being the inconsistent quality of the films themselves. The Phantom Menace has to be one of the worst plotted and written films that I have ever seen in my years. This is a problem that continues to plague the franchise to this day, with Disney's mishandling of the IP in recent years. With some being absolute great as Rogue One and The Mandalorian, to outright stinkers such as The Acolyte. So the question is, why did I pick Star Wars: The Clone Wars to begin with? Let me mention first that Genndy Tartakovsky's Clone Wars anime series could have easily taken the spot as well. Considering that Clone Wars was a continuation of this one and how excellent the miniseries was as well, it deserves a spot alongside it. So, for the first time on this list, 2 series occupy one spot. Anyway, to answer the question why I put it on this list, well, the beauty of the Clone Wars is that it avoided all of these flaws for its entire run. Star Wars: The Clone Wars stands among the best the franchise ever had to offer. It's a great anime series from top to bottom, and you would be hard-pressed to find many better than this series. Let's take the presentation for instance. The series could have went the simplistic route and it still would have been acclaimed by its fan base, just solely off the name itself. This is not the case with Star Wars: The Clone Wars. They went above and beyond for the series. Upon airing on television, episodes were actually presented in THX audio. In other words, this series had the same audio quality that was put into the films. That was incredible seeing that when it first aired on Cartoon Network. They treated the series as a huge deal during its run, and it had every right to be treated as such. Having it on the network at the height of the channel's success made it an ultimate destination for cartoons. This level of quality extended to the storytelling as well. This is an aspect that vastly improved over the prequel trilogy. Dave Filoni did a great job at showrunning the series. Everything from the direction of the episodes, the writing, dialogue, the characters' motives, to the overarching plot of the wars itself, always felt fleshed out. The biggest character improvement in the series was Anakin Skywalker himself. In the prequel trilogy, he always appeared as a character that was unclear in how he talked and acted. Also, Hayden Christensen's deliverance of dialogue was very stiff and lacked any kind of emotion to make the viewer invest in him as a character. In Star Wars: The Clone Wars, he is written very differently. Sure, he does resemble the character from the films, but he is written as a more likable character. He is a bit serious, but also a bit more playful. He comes across as someone that is comfortable in his role as a Jedi. This comes across in his dialogue, which is leagues better than any of the films in the prequel trilogy, and even the original trilogy as well. It's that good. Speaking of Jedi, I loved the addition of Ahsoka as Anakin's Padawan. She was in the tutelage of a Jedi who was just trying to figure out his role in life himself. Of course, we all know what role he ends up being at the end. I loved how throughout the series she constantly evolves into becoming better, even without the constant guidance of Anakin. She makes mistakes and pays a hard price for making them. She is hands down my favorite character in the entire series, and my third favorite character in all of Star Wars, with Han Solo and Luke Skywalker being number 2 and 1 respectively. She was such a great addition to the lore, and she finally gotten her own series, albeit live action. She definitely deserved it. Speaking of characters, the players presented in the prequel trilogy were all here as well, such as Yoda, of course, Princess Amidala, and Mace Windu. We also get renditions of Count Dooku, General Grievous, and Palpatine as well. They were so fleshed out that they felt like very different characters in Clone Wars. Amidala plays a more active role in many of the episodes. It was refreshing to see this. You never got a sense of her character. She always felt like an afterthought to the story being told. Here, she felt more important to the events that were happening, even when she wasn't in the episode. This went a long way to make the viewer care about her and the characters in general. The kicker was that their movie likenesses were translated to CG animation almost perfectly. This made the experience even better because it always felt like you were watching an extension of the films. It always felt like everything being presented to the viewers was important to the overarching plotline. There wasn't one episode that didn't seem like it was a waste of story. You always got a sense that something was always leading to something else down the line. And when you seen the payoff, it was so rewarding because you remember what led to it. This is what storytelling looks like at expert level. And the clone soldiers factoring into the plot made it even more important. What I loved is how they weren't just some disposable soldiers. They were episodes where you see them express the realities of war and living in this world. It made the characters more relatable, and you felt every death that happened to their forces. They were brimming with personality, despite them being human copies. A far cry from the clumsiness of the stormtroopers in the original trilogy. Not only they were well trained for battle, but also they interacted with each other in a way that felt realistic to the situations they were in. But you know what was the beauty of it all? The events, the character motives, everything was canonical to the films. Yes, Star Wars: The Clone Wars was a series that filled in the plot between the second and third films of the prequel trilogy, and they still managed to give viewers a part of the lore they would have never seen if it wasn't for this series. Every episode always took place in different locations and showcasing different characters to give us the bigger picture. No animated series has never approached the material the way Star Wars: The Clone Wars did. Sure, some series had an overarching plotline that culminated with an episode that ended it, but most series usually had self-contained stories that resolved everything by the end of the episode. But The Clone Wars is the only anime series that I've ever seen where some episodes felt they had a resolution but truly were just a part of the bigger picture. Star Wars: The Clone Wars is the only anime series that made you feel like you were watching a continuous film. No one has ever pulled it off ever since. Well, maybe The Bad Batch, but that doesn't count since it's essentially a continuation of The Clone Wars in a way. Star Wars: The Clone Wars is so canonical to the films, supposedly the series ends where the third film in the prequel trilogy begins. Whether if this is true or not, one thing is clear. Star Wars: The Clone Wars was an animated series that will never be seen on television again. Sure, there would be other animated series in the Star Wars universe that would come after it, such as the aforementioned Bad Batch, Star Wars Rebels, and Star Wars Resistance, they will never match what Star Wars The Clone Wars did for the franchise in animation. Now, if they can just get Dave Filoni or Jon Favreau to rewrite the sequel trilogy, my number 6 is a cartoon classic that I believe has aged well. It was huge in its day, and in my book, deserves every single praise that it has gotten over the years. It was worth parking in front of a television to watch it back in its day. I mentioned it so many times on this channel as is. Of course, the anime series that I speak of is none other than... Some may say, why would something like this be high on the list? Well, I have a rebuttal for that. Name a cartoon that hasn't only aged well, but also was bigger than this cartoon in the 1980s. Because let's be frank, a lot of cartoons from the 80s haven't been able to claim that. This is hugely important in judging how well cartoons are remembered. Just like watching a movie from years ago multiple times, it's always engaging whenever you watch it. I believe that The Real Ghostbusters is that particular cartoon that captures that. It has stood the test of time, and it's because of one reason: the writers. Mainly the first season on ABC and the syndicated episodes in particular. You would be hard-pressed to find a series at the time that taken the risk that it did with its storytelling the way The Real Ghostbusters did. There were several episodes where they contended with demons and various ghouls, and these weren't just some light fare. These were portrayed as scary creatures that could exist in our world. The series even pulls from H.P. Lovecraft and classic horror stories, for goodness sake. Also, they brought back the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man in an episode or two. This was the movie in animated form. One episode had the Necronomicon in it, for goodness sake. As you can imagine, that was in the syndicated version because this was the 80s, and that wasn't going to be allowed on any network at the time. It's that freedom to tell those kinds of stories that always put it over the top with me back then and to this day. Even though the syndicated version was looser with what they could get away with back then, the Saturday morning version was no slouch. The writers took some liberties in the first and second seasons of the series. On top of that, it was not only an example of the freedom most studios had put with their cartoons in syndication, but also the respect the creators had for the IP. This was in part due to Joe Medjuck and Michael Gross being involved with the creation of the series, the same producers that were involved in the creation of the movie. As I explained in The Rise and Demise of Saturday Mornings, the 1980s, they were adamant on getting it aired on ABC the way they wanted to. We all know that the animated series is based on the first film, but The Real Ghostbusters made the film more relevant, and it was this level of care that was put into this series. The producers of The Real Ghostbusters didn't want to cut any corners and felt that their series was a hot ticket. They treated the series as such. I have a confession. I had never seen the movie before watching the series when I was a kid. It wasn't until the early 90s when I saw it on HBO that I started to appreciate the franchise. It was a cartoon that blurred the lines between seriousness and lighthearted. It felt like how the creators intended every episode to be, a sequel to the film. I had to see the entire syndicated series and ABC Season 1 many times over during its airing. Now, you may be wondering why I mentioned the first season on ABC and the syndicated version. It is because they were both made simultaneously and had the same kind of storytelling. Even though the ABC episodes were a tad tamer, the rest of the seasons changed things up, with Peter sounding different and Slimer being more prominent in the episodes. I thought these episodes were well written, even though the depiction of Janine was a lot softer than in the syndicated version. When people tend to mention the series, it's always in line with the syndicated version. in that first season on ABC. The syndicated episodes tended to be edgier than the ABC version. Well, after the first season, that is. Some episodes could be considered downright creepy, as if they were structured to lean toward mature audiences. It was that thin line that made the series unique. Also, I loved how the series delved into the lives of the Ghostbusters themselves, such as Egon being the descendant of the man who banished an evil witch from a small town, Ray's uncle owning a comedy store, or Winston meeting his dad. Telling backstories or alluding to them just wasn't a thing in animated series back then. They were structured to include one-shot storytelling. This series had it too. That was the nature of cartoons back then, but that extra aspect made it stand out amongst other cartoons at the time. It felt that they could exist in real life. Technically they did because they were based on their movie counterparts, but I digress. And of course, you had to love Peter and Slimer's odd relationship. Well, at least in the syndicated version. Speaking of Slimer, many hated the revisions of him and Janine. Slimer ended up getting his own cartoon segment attached to the series. Now, I can't understand the disdain for the Slimer episodes completely, but despite them, the series always felt like comfort food for me, and it was my go-to series when I need that escape as a kid. Of course, I showcased the original box set that I have of the series on the channel. The Real Ghostbusters is an anime series that's rarely seen today, full of charm and charisma, always managed to entertain. Ultimately, The Real Ghostbusters was an animated series that reminds many of those who grew up in the 80s of Saturday mornings, a time that is long gone and remains a relic of the past. A cartoon that is a product of an era where it was all fun and games. Every time I see it, it instantly takes me back to my time as a kid. Not a lot of cartoons can do that for me. The ones on this list don't do that better than The Real Ghostbusters. Sometimes that's all it takes for something to be great. And of course, the theme song. Gotta love that theme song. Ghostbusters! Number 5 is an anime series that I truly consider to be the cream of the crop. A cartoon that pushed the medium so far forward, its effect on the industry is still seen in animation today. You would be hard pressed to find a cartoon that doesn't emulate an element or two from it. This series that I speak of is none other than Avatar: The Last Airbender. Upon watching this series, it always dawned upon me how they were able to tell such a nuanced story filled with the horrors of war and strife, but somehow never managed to ever step over the line. Considering the themes and setting that is presented in Avatar, it's surprisingly tame. Avatar: The Last Airbender is one of those ideas that come once in a while that shake up the entire medium. What made the series so special itself was the characters and its setting. Let's take the main character, Aang, for instance. He's a protagonist whom you grew fond of as the series progresses on. I always loved his innocent nature, despite him having to endure a destiny that has him restoring the balance of the world that he ends up in. We see his struggle to come to terms with being the last surviving relic of the past. Later in the series, we watch him become a hero as he fully embraces his destiny and takes on a journey to master all of the elemental bending powers in order to become the Avatar, just as many did before. But it's his companions that alleviate the burden and stress of his journey. The dynamic between Katara, Sokka, Aang, and Toph wasn't only done extremely well, but also vital to Aang's growth particularly, as Katara and Toph helped him by teaching him the powers that he needed. On the surface level, it may seem that his friends serve a basic function to him, but as the series progresses, you see the layers peel and reveal different aspects of their lives. They truly prove their place alongside Aang. Speaking of layers, Prince Zuko has to be one of the most conflicted and well-written characters that I've ever seen in any cartoon. He's racked with a destiny of his own, with him ruling over the Fire Nation one day. In the beginning of the series, he's portrayed as someone that is just willing to do anything to achieve his ultimate goal. But as the series progresses on, we see Zuko not only become a better man and leader, also sees that his goals weren't what he was truly looking for. It's the several encounters with Aang and his friends that make him see that he wasn't right in the grand scheme of things. Also, what adds another layer to the character is Uncle Iroh. I have to say, this character is low-key my favorite in the entire series. Even though he's a general, Iroh never acted high and mighty. He was more of a teacher dispensing wisdom onto Zuko as much as he could. He had a playfulness to his character, and being voiced by Mako was an extra layer to the character that I loved. Yes, the same man who voiced Aku in Samurai Jack. Rest in peace, Mako. Anyway, Iroh was a man who has seen so much in his years and tries to impart knowledge on Zuko, even though he resists most of the time. Their relationship was like Mr. Miyagi to Daniel-san, but with fire powers and internal conflicts. As the series progresses on, we see Aang and Zuko's journeys play out until they both align with one another. Prince Zuko has one of the best redemption arcs that I've ever seen in any anime series. By the end of the series, you begin to understand him through the journey he goes through, but also start to see him as someone worthy of being redeemed. Same goes for Aang as well. He grows accustomed to the new world that he lives in now, and not only finally embraces the role that he worked diligently to become, but also matures a lot as a person due to the battles he has fought and the growth Sokka, Katara, and Toph also went through with him. There are so many elements that play into it all, such as taking aspects of Chinese, Japanese, and Buddhist mythology and history and piecing them together to create a world that is like ours, but fantastical at the same time. It had flying water buffaloes, for goodness sake. I just adored Appa. The history and lore that the creators made is still being made into books based on the series. Most anime series never get this treatment after their conclusion. This spoke on how well created Avatar was. In all, Avatar The Last Airbender stood as the next evolution in television animation. Cartoon series has never been the same after its conclusion. In that time, we have gotten anime series that had Avatar's influence in them, such as The Dragon Prince, The Legend of Vox Machina, Kip and the Age of Wonder Beast, and even a reimagining of Voltron, The Legendary Defender, the sequel series, The Legend of Korra, and most recently, Invincible Fight Girl and Ianu. All of them were either inspired by Avatar or had many who worked on Avatar itself working on these series. This series will always stand out as a blueprint for modern day action animation for its nuanced storytelling and anime-like visual style. The series even lives on with live action adaptations. It's an IP that had done something many couldn't do: maintain its relevancy.